All right. Are we good? Okay. I was looking for that thumbs up. Welcome. I call to order this special meeting of the Public Works Commission. Kathy, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Glad to. Everyone stand. Put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Andrew, can we do roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Dunbarton,
Here.
Commissioner Britton,
Here.
Commissioner Lakevold,
Here.
Vice Chair Gretton,
Here.
and Chairperson Hayes,
Here.
all present.
All right. Is there a motion to approve this very extensive agenda?
So move. Second.
Could we have a vote, please?
I don't have a computer. Oh. I vote aye. I vote aye. Yeah.
Motion passes to approve the agenda.
All right. This is the time for members of the public to address Public Works Commission on items listed in the special meeting agenda only. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. This will be the only public comment taken. There's nobody in chambers. Do we have anybody online?
For general public comments, we are only taking it in the chambers, but for the item itself, we will be taking it both in person and via Zoom as well.
Okay. So moving on to commissioner comments. There's no public comments. There's no response to public comment. Any brief announcements? Anyone? Any reports on liaison committee roles, activities, or meetings attended? No. Brief comments on matter within this brief comments on matters within subject matter jurisdiction of the commission. All right, moving on to the main event, matters for commission consideration. Item 7A, review of CIP 619 Kelly Court improvements. Do we have a staff report?
Yes, Commissioner Hayes, we do. And Community Resources Director Lisa Nichols, thank you for having me tonight. I am going to begin tonight's presentation. And we'd like to begin tonight really with providing an overview of the history of the pickleball courts, how they came to be, and how the current policies and hours came to be. And I'm getting used to the clicker, so I might be pausing to remind myself to go to the next slide. So following extensive community engagement for over 2 years, City Council approved converting one of the 2 Kelly tennis courts at the Clark Complex into 4 dedicated pickleball courts in March of 2017. The courts opened to the public in May of 2017. In July of 2020, 2 of the 4 courts were closed due to safety concerns. Following the opening of the Kelly pickleball courts, due to the nature of the sport and its use of equipment that produces what we can best describe as a popping noise, staff received ongoing feedback from nearby residents about noise impacts. Staff and the former Department Use Policies Subcommittee of the Parks and Recreation Commission performed extensive research and made several recommendations to the Parks Commission on various noise mitigation solutions with no resolve for over 3 years. And this was until staff and the subcommittee formed a pickleball stakeholders focus group. The group consisted of representatives from the local neighborhood and pickleball community, and this was in 2021. The purpose of this group was to discuss viable solutions that would limit the noise impacts while providing use of the pickleball courts during preferred times by the pickleball community. At its July 13th, 2021 meeting, City Council approved new use policies and hours of a result of the stakeholder group's work. So the approved hours, which remain current to this day, are the courts, just the Kelly pickleball courts, are closed Sunday and Monday. On Tuesday, the courts are open from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Wednesday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Thursday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., Friday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. These hours provided the pickleball community with access to the pickleball courts during their most desired times and relief to the nearby residents 2 days a week, all day, and several evenings throughout the week. At its November 2nd, 2021 meeting, staff did present a report to the Parks Commission on the effectiveness of the adopted use policies and hours after a 90-day trial period. Staff was happy to report that the feedback was very limited. It was limited to 3 members of the pickleball community sharing dissatisfaction with the limited use hours, 1 nearby resident sharing gratitude for the limited use hours, and 1 nearby resident sharing reports of the courts being used outside of the use hours by either players jumping the fence or that's our best assumption on how they're getting in the courts. So really, this limited feedback compared to the feedback that we were getting before the adopted use policies and new hours really showed the effectiveness of this consensus-building effort of the stakeholder group. The Parks Commission did receive and file that report. Since staff's report at that meeting, staff has received feedback from members of the pickleball community demonstrating their dissatisfaction with the limited court use hours and the 2 temporarily closed pickleball courts. Additionally, members of the pickleball community have expressed how extremely difficult it is to secure any time to reserve to play at the 2 open courts. The courts are available for reservation by residents who obtain a pickleball membership, so you do have to be a resident to obtain a pickleball membership. It's at an annual rate, and they can reserve hours then at an hourly use fee. Without a reservation, the courts would be available on a drop-in basis, free of charge. However, the courts are reserved 98% of the time that they are open, so obtaining a reservation is very difficult due to the high demand. There are currently 271 members of the Hermosa Beach Pickleball membership program. Staff has not received any direct feedback or concern on noise impacts since we changed the use policies and hours in 2021. The complaints have been limited to that 1 nearby resident who continues to report continued incidents of the unauthorized use of the courts outside of the adopted hours, which this CIP would resolve by anti-climb fencing and adjusting the fencing between the tennis courts and the pickleball courts. Next slide. I'm saying next slide because I'm used to saying that, and you took away the clicker. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Sorry. To address the safety concerns that led to that temporary closure of the 2 pickleball courts, staff recommended CIP 619 to City Council at fiscal year 2022-23 CIP study session, and that was in April of 2022. The project would include resurfacing and a design to determine the feasibility of opening those 2 temporarily closed courts. Council approved the project in June of 2022. In April 2023, staff presented to City Council a revised scope to CIP 619, and that was to include the resurfacing and reconfiguration of all the courts instead of just the pickleball courts, so also the tennis courts and the basketball courts, amongst several other upgrades. Annually, staff does provide the Parks Commission of an overview, really, of established CIPs that are related to the purview of the department and the commission. And we do this before the upcoming fiscal year budget is adopted and before the CIP study session, so then we can share the commission's feedback on those CIPs with City Council at the CIP study session. So in April 2023, the Parks Commission provided input that it deemed CIP 619 a high priority project, and Council approved the revised scope of work in June of 2023. In April 2024, the anticipated timeline for the final design and project advertisement for CIP 619 was shared with the Parks Commission and City Council during the Commission's annual review of the CIP and at the Council CIP study session. As part of the Parks Master Plan process, by the Parks Commission and City Council reviewing it in October and November of 2024, staff highlighted efforts to advance CIP 619 and was clear that it would restore the use of all 4 courts as part of an overall necessary improvement to the larger Kelly Courts facility. The plan was approved on November 12, 2024, the Parks Master Plan that is, and it highlighted the growing demand for pickleball and the desire for additional facilities, while also acknowledging concern about noise and the need to continue to balance the schedule between open play, reservations, and programming while considering those noise impacts. At the February 25th, 2025 City Council meeting, staff requested approval to award a construction contract for CIP 619. It would allow the city to reopen the pickleball courts that had been temporarily closed following the completion of the project. City Council did not approve the award of the construction contract. They rejected all bids and directed staff to provide an additional opportunity to the Parks Commission and the Public Works Commission to review the project and provide feedback before returning to City Council. So at this time, I'd like to hand it over to John, interim city engineer, to provide more detailed information on the actual CIP project.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Good evening, Chairman Hayes, members of the Public Works Commission. Mr. San Clemente, Public Works Director, regretfully could not be here tonight, so I'll try to do my best to fill in his very, very big shoes. Again, my name is John Osprey. I'm the interim city engineer for the city of Hermosa Beach. As you may be aware, this issue that is in front of you tonight was last reviewed by the Parks Commission on April 1, 2025, just a few days ago. So I wanted to share with you, in order for us to engage the community on this very important matter, we provided notice to the pickleball community and neighboring residents on Wednesday, March the 26th. Staff posted signage informing the users of Kelly Courts that this item would be included on the Parks Commission's agenda. Additionally, notice was provided to the former pickleball stakeholder group, pickleball members, and residents whom had reported the use of the pickleball courts after hours via email following the council's action at its February 2025 meeting. Staff followed this same process with tonight's meeting. We try to engage as many folks as we possibly can. Okay, you want to do this? Okay. All right, sure. While council will provide, that's you.
Yeah, that's going to be me.
Okay,
So you
so
can
do we
get
want to
into-
go through
Yes.
the existing site conditions? Okay. So, I think that you may have seen this in the council's presentation that we did, but I'm just going to go through it. As you know, the existing condition of the pickleball courts, the basketball courts, and the tennis courts warrants a reconditioning and refurbishment. Regardless of what we are going to do, there are cracks in, I was actually passing by the site to check the Clark construction this morning. I went in there just to make sure. There are visible cracks in the pavement. They cause a potential dangerous situation that needs to be mended. The fencing is not in a very good shape. As you've seen, the fabric is rusted, and it needs to be stretched. Overall condition of the court is not very favorable, and that's trying to be very polite about it. You've also noticed a very steep grade differential between the basketball court and the pickleball courts. There is about 1 foot of a difference between the two slabs, because I think these slabs were installed at different times. So there is a 1 foot almost differential at the very west end of the courts, which is closer to Clark Field. And as you get closer to the street, obviously that differential grade separation dies down, it daylights. But it causes a problem. And most importantly, as it stands right now, we don't have ADA accessibility to the site from the parking lot. Now, the slide that you have in front of you depicts where the layout of the play fields are as it stands for the tennis court, pickleball courts, and the basketball courts. So the red line shows the existing layout, and the black lines depicts the proposed layout. I'm just going to go through a little bit of why we are doing what you are seeing in front of you. The courts, as they are right now, the way they were laid out, the dimensions does not match the standards that are generally followed. And for this particular sports field, we are following the Pickleball Association recommended layouts for recreational play. Same thing with the tennis court, except for the tennis court layout, we are following the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, recommended play fields for recreational play. And for the basketball courts, we are following the high school standard as recommended by the AIA standards. So if you looked at those standards, they tell you exactly the size of the courts and the clearance between those courts and the adjacent obstructions. So as it stands right now, the courts they do not necessarily follow. They're short by a few inches or a fraction of a few inches on the layout of the court, and they also do not meet, in some cases, the required clearances that needs to be in place between the play field and the adjacent obstructions, such as the fences, such as a wall that separates the lawn bowling, in this example, the lawn bowling court from the pickleball courts and the tennis courts. So what needs to happen in order to follow those standards and make sure that we are adhering to those standards, there has to be some physical changes. So we just could not, we didn't have enough, lack of a better term, enough real estate, the way the slabs are right now, to push them and adjust them to make sure that standards are followed and those clearances are adhered to. So what needs to happen, if you can imagine this, we need to push towards the Clark field from east to west, essentially add a piece of a concrete slab to the existing, about 1.5 feet, in order to gain the clearances that we need to have. Also, in the long, I call it the long direction, call it this north-south direction, the pickleball courts do not have the clearances that we need. So as a result, we need to push towards the north side by about 3.5 feet and literally expand the size of the slab that is allocated for the tennis courts and the pickleball courts. In doing so, we will achieve two things. We will make sure that the standards are followed as far as the size of the courts are concerned, and more importantly, we are also making sure that the clearances that are required by those standards are adhered to between the lines of the courts, the edge of the lines of the courts, and anything that is around it. So these are some of the improvements that is going to be achieved if we were to implement the project, CIP 619. As I explained, we are going to extend the concrete slab in the west direction and in the north direction. We're going to repair and resurface all the courts, take care of all those cracks, put in literally a new layer, a new coating throughout. And I believe we are changing the color scheme also. We are putting new fencing, all new fencing between the courts. Now, when we push the courts towards the west end, as probably you recall, there is already an existing block wall that separates the Clark field from the pickleball courts. That needs to be removed. A new curb wall, not too high, probably about 1.5 feet, is going to be installed that is going to have fencing on top of the wall to separate Clark Field, 10-foot high wall fencing, separate Clark Field from pickleball courts. The fencing that separates the tennis court And the basketball courts from the pickleball courts and the tennis courts is going to be all brand new. And throughout the perimeter, facing Valley and then separating the courts from the parking lot, adjacent parking lot, we are going to have new fabric. Black vinyl coated fabric, very aesthetically pleasing. And it's also, it's much more durable than the existing chain link fabric that we have. More importantly, we are going to create a path, a concrete path between the parking lot. We're going to restripe the parking lot and connect the parking lot from the ADA stalls to the back side, to the west side of the pickleball court and the basketball courts. There's an area in between where a new gate is going to be installed. So people can have direct ADA accessible path of travel between the parking lot and the courts that we do not have right now. Another obstacle that is in the way right now are the light fixtures. I believe there are 4 of them on the west side, adjacent to the Clark Field, that are inside of the pickleball courts. Again, in order to make sure that there are not going to be any obstacles, we're going to push those lights right outside in that pathway that exists between the Clark Field and the pickleball courts. Those are going to be brand new lights. So again, the changes that are going to happen is the court sizes are going to get adjusted, resurfacing is going to happen, fencing is going to get upgraded, new gates are going to be installed, path of travel, ADA path of travel is going to be put in place, and lighting is going to be also improved, and also new court equipment, the basketball posts, the backboards, the hoops, the netting for the tennis court, and the posts and the pickleball. All of that is going to be new and is going to not only add to the aesthetic value, but also the quality of play for the players who are going to enjoy. Is that you?
Yes. Okay, well, actually, let me go ahead and go to the previous slide. Thank you, John. So while council will provide final direction on this CIP, staff would like to be sure the commission is aware of concerns with not proceeding with the CIP. Those concerns include, but are not limited to, extended closure of 2 pickleball courts that would further limit the access for these courts to the community. Continued safety hazards due to the poor site conditions and non-compliant layouts. Escalating cost if resurfacing and repairs are deferred any further. Lost investment in design and bid preparation, approximately $250,000 to date. Increased community dissatisfaction from both the pickleball community due to the very limited play options and nearby residents if unauthorized or unregulated use continues. And misalignment with our adopted plans, including our Parks Master Plan and goals of Plan Hermosa. So tonight, staff is seeking the Public Works Commission review the project, provide feedback, and then we would bring this to council to make its final recommendation. And we are available for any questions that you may have. This concludes our report.
Do any commissioners have any questions for staff?
I do.
Okay.
It sounds like the safety concerns are separate from the noise concerns. Is that correct?
That is a correct statement,
Right.
Commissioner.
I'm just curious because I walk past there pretty regularly. On the west side is Clark Field. On the south side is the Clark Building. On the north side is a field, part of a parking lot, and a building that's being used by the police department. On the east side is the Greenbelt. How the neighbors on the other side of the Greenbelt are? I'm curious. Is it generating that much noise? It's a little bit surprising, considering the distances involved.
Yeah, it's the neighbors that really are lining the Clark complex. So the field and,
Got it.
really just around that entire complex.
Because it's kind of a natural amphitheater, so they end up, yeah.
Yeah, based on our past complaints, right, before we adopted the use policies in ours, so we haven't received any direct complaints from any of the residents since 2021.
Right. I don't know if it exists, but I'm curious if there are any materials for the windscreens or the nets that actually also have acoustic properties that might facilitate some sort of reduction in noise while we're at it.
In other communities, I'm aware of situations where the proximity of the residential units abutting a sports field facility where noise was generated, they have tried different methods. They have not been very successful because, as you know, noise travels up, and it's going to be very, very difficult to control noise in an open environment.
Yeah, it will in a free field. And from the diagram that you showed, there will be 4 pickleball courts, 1 tennis court, 2 basketball courts. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. The same exact number as we do have today,
Right.
with the exception of the closed pickleball courts that
Right.
are not in use right now.
Right. So in a sense, it will be kind of a renovation and upgrading of what's there with the changes necessary to make it more compliant, more safe, more ADA compatible, and all of those things.
Well said. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Yeah, just a couple clarities. The ADA compliance, is this going to be something that was already in the project, or we have to add that to the project?
As you are aware, anytime the city has a document which is called an ADA transition plan. It outlines all the deficiencies that the city has in all of its facilities. One of those deficiencies that has been outlined is the lack of ADA access at this particular court. So, and anytime you are investing a considerable amount of money in order to refurbish and upgrade a city-owned facility, then you get obligated to take a look at upgrading or making those recommended actions of the ADA transition plan. In this case, we're just following that. We are making a substantial investment in upgrading the facility. It is not accessible right now. It behooves us to do our utmost to make sure that we are incorporating that element, and as a result of that, we did. We wanted the designers to look into it and give us a best path of travel between the parking lot and the courts.
So it was, the ADA was already included in the original 6819 proposal?
Yes,
Or-
it was
okay.
always a part and parcel of the design of the project.
Because I know that was one of the questions that came up with city council, and I would assume that that was already built in, so that we don't have to make any additional ADA adjustments. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hayes.
Go ahead.
Okay, mine was just a very simple question. Once this work is done, would these different areas, say where the pickleball is, it could accommodate another sport if all of a sudden pickleball is not popular anymore? Accommodate a half-court basketball court or something like that. I'm just saying that if pickleball was not as popular and the city decided another future use.
Now, many years ago, when pickleball fever was catching on, a lot of municipalities, a lot of organizations turned their second or third or fourth, or maybe the only tennis court that they had, to pickleball courts. And I think we did the same thing in here, and as I've seen it in many other communities, they have done the same thing. I have seen tennis courts being turned into basketball courts, and vice versa. So if the real estate is there to accommodate a particular play field or court, then it obviously, based on the needs, we can always make the adjustments that are needed. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Gretham.
Yeah, so I've noticed from reviewing the drawings, especially sheet 18, which has dimensions, especially for the pickleball, I I can appreciate that we're pretty severely constrained on fitting the pickleball courts within the proposed fenced-in area. What I learned new from the staff report is that we're also facing constraints with respect to the basketball courts. And so I was thinking if there's a fence between the basketball courts and the pickleball area, and I might ask, well, why don't we give ourselves some more room by shifting that fence northbound into the basketball area? Is the fence where it is because we have to satisfy constraints for both basketball and pickleball?
Commissioner, the existing condition of the basketball courts, other than the fact that they are a minute fraction of an inch off from the recommended court dimensions, everything is okay with that. Actually, we have much more clearance that are needed from the play fields to the surrounding fencing in the basketball courts, which was great because that gave us the ability to take some of the area that is now within the basketball court, push the slab, if you can imagine, of the pickleball courts and the tennis courts about 3 feet, 3.5 feet into the basketball courts and put a new fence.
Okay, so we've basically already done what we could do.
On the plans.
Is what I'm
Yeah,
hearing.
recommended on the plans.
Per the plans that are proposed.
Yes.
Okay.
And in
okay.
doing what we are recommending to do as part of the plans, all the concerns, safety concerns, and all the dimensional layouts as recommended by those organizations that I mentioned is going to be implemented if the project moves forward.
Thank you for answering that at a high level. I'm still going to poke at the details and maybe to enlighten the public and others. A little mini ex parte is I did study a little bit about pickleball courts, and in addition to the dimensions for the actual striping, the in lines and the service lines, they have what they define as a play area. So those are additional margins that go beyond what's considered in and out. USA Pickleball, I assume, is what we're adopting as our standard that we're following, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And in there, they define a minimum playing surface, and they give measurements on that. And what it amounts to is that you want to have an extra 5 feet on each side in the width direction and an extra 8 feet in the length direction or the north-south direction.
In the long direction, yes,
Yeah.
correct.
And so a specific question I'll ask is I noticed that when we have the adjacent courts in the width direction, we actually have 8 feet, so we're kind of sharing there. To your knowledge, is that okay per the standard?
Absolutely. Commissioner, in fact, I am looking at the Pickleball Association standards for the sport of pickleball. That's on page 11 of their publication, where you are looking at multiple courts.
Okay.
They refer to it, quote unquote, as overruns. So these overruns are exactly the dimensions that you mentioned. For a battery of courts, meaning 2 courts adjacent to one another, the separation between those 2 courts ought to be at least 8 feet. Again, we are following the recreational play, not the competition, because the competition play, it's longer, it's different. And from the and 5 feet between either one of the courts and adjacent obstacles, fence, walls, whatnot.
Right. And per my review of sheet 18, in the width direction, we've gotten in some cases 5 or maybe 5.3 inches, 5.6 inches, so we're good there. And then you accounted for that overlap in the middle. And it looks like we have anywhere from 8 feet 6 inches to 8 feet 9 inches to 9 feet, depending on where you're looking there. So we've just been able to comply, it appears there.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's just to appreciate the challenge and that we actually are anchored to something specific for our requirements.
Absolutely.
Which is this USA pickleball rules. And then you made mention of a wall on the west side near Clark Field. That's just a very short wall, right? You said it maybe like 1.5 feet, and could you describe that a little
It's
bit?
referred to as a curb wall. It's not very high. If you gave me a minute, I can take a look. I think I brought a set of the plans with me. I can give you exactly the dimensions, how high it is, but less than knee-high, I would say. And that's generally for the purpose of taking care of the grade separation that exists, because the courts are a little bit lower than Clark Field, to address that, and also the new fencing posts. The posts are going to be inside that wall.
Right.
10 foot high to separate the Clark Field from the pickleball courts.
Right. So this is appreciably shorter than, say, I'll bring it up, the wall on the south end of the courts adjacent to lawn bowling. Thank you.
Substantially lower. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. And then, given that we are fairly constrained, I assume that we're not going to have any room for anything in there except players and the nets and the posts. In other words, we're not going to have room for like a bench or anything like that in the area, I assume.
You're absolutely correct.
'Cause we're just so-
Regretfully, it does not allow for any benches or any other furniture to be placed between the play areas and the adjacent clearances that we have, the 8 foot, 5 feet. Those 5 feet clearances and 8 feet are absolute clearances.
Okay.
We need not to have an object in between.
Right. And I think it was answered earlier that this wind screen is mainly for privacy and the wind, and is not intended to provide any sound barrier benefit, correct?
Absolutely correct.
Okay. I believe those are all my questions. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a few. Was there any discussion at any point after the courts originally opened of reducing the number of courts to 2 courts?
No, not until they were in fact closed for safety concerns.
You mentioned that you're following, these are kind of all over the place. You mentioned that you're following the AIA standards for basketball and tennis. Are there AIA standards for pickleball?
Not that I'm aware of. There is not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it just
Yeah.
struck me as curious, so I asked the question. Were there ever any discussions of putting pickleball anywhere else in the city?
Yes, when we were evaluating over those 2 years, the proposal from residents to have permanent pickleball courts in the city, we did consider the community center, but the residents there that surround the community center tennis courts are closer than they are at the Clark complex, and the community center is highly used for programming. The Kelly tennis courts at the time, and actually still, are just available for drop-in play. We do not have reservations or programming at those courts. So really, it would have greatly impacted all of our contract class and summer camp programming at the community center and the reservations that we had. The community center tennis courts were more highly used as well than the Kelly tennis courts were.
Okay, so, I mean, because it's been alluded to by council that this was the time that we should reevaluate where courts could go, but that evaluation happened before the courts ever went in.
Correct. And really nothing has changed since that evaluation.
Exactly.
Programming is probably more extensive than it was then now at the community center tennis courts.
Okay, and I think you answered this. The ADA access, that provides ADA access to all of the courts, basketball, tennis, pickleball, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know at how many council, probably, let's call it CIP sessions, was this CIP presented to council?
I believe it's 2, but I'm going to verify in my background right now because I have it right in front of me.
Okay, because I think you said that it was, the first one was the 22-23. It was initially presented in the 22-23 study session.
If it's 2021?
2022, 2023 was the first time it was presented, and that's when it was merely to work on the pickleball courts, right? And then we presented it the next fiscal year, and I'm verifying this because I'm just finding that location in my verbal because I don't want to get the dates wrong, for the 2022 to 2023 first presented, and that included resurfacing and a design for the pickleball courts. And then for the 2023-2024 CIP study session, that's when we presented the revised scope of work for the project to include the tennis courts and the basketball court. Tennis court and basketball courts.
Okay, and then the 24-25 study session, it would have been presented there as well?
It would have been presented there, so that makes 3 times.
Okay.
And that would have been more of an informational status update at that 2024-25
And
study
so
session.
if somebody had questions about what the scope of this project was, they could have asked them at that time, correct?
Yes, certainly, as well as the years the commission reviewed the CIPs that pertain to the department in Parks and Recreation and our Parks Master Plan joint meeting that we had and the City Council Parks Master Plan review.
Okay, which gets into my next question is, how many times would Parks and Rec have had to have the same presentation? I would assume it's, you do a presentation after, so it'd be 3 there as well.
It would be 3 and then our joint, so 4.
Okay. And again, if anybody had a question about the scope of this project, they could have asked it at any one of those times in the last 3 years.
Correct. And Public Works Director San Clemente and I, during our director's report, have also provided status updates on where we're at with the design. You know, we're at 30% now, we're at 60%, 90%. So we've continued to provide those updates through our director's reports. And I don't have the exact number of times, but I could certainly get that information. It was, we
Okay.
kept the commission quite informed.
Is it easier to make changes early in a project, or is it easier to make changes later in the design of a project?
Much easier to do it when we are dealing with a conceptual design and have not spent a couple of $100,000 completing the design.
Okay, thank you. And then we received bids for this project. Were the bids higher or lower than the estimated budget?
The lowest bid was a bit lower than the estimate, not by 2.
I'm only interested in the bid that was recommended to council. Was that higher or lower than the estimated project budget in the CIP?
To the best of my recollection, it was a little bit higher than the estimate provided by the engineer. However, we had adequate funding in the project to pay for it.
Okay, so the overall project was still going to be significantly
Under budget.
Under budget.
Under
essentially.
budget, that's
okay.
correct.
That's all the questions I have.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. When you said it was presented to City Council, was it on the consent calendar or was it a presentation presented to the council?
It's a presentation presented to the council because it's through the CIP study session. So there is no consent calendar items at those meetings.
Okay. I'll comment once we're ready through his questions.
Okay, so I think that wraps up questions. That brings us, it's not, the agenda is kind of wonky. We're supposed to do public comment now. It read a little weird. Okay,
Mr.
so.
Chairman, I'm sorry if you can indulge me for a quick second to address the question that Commissioner Griffin asked about the height of that wall, the new wall that is going to be separating the Clark Field. It's only about 8 inches. So it's literally a curb, not a wall.
Good to know.
All right, so I now open public comment. Seeing no one in chambers, do we have anybody online?
Yes, if anyone is everyone watching via Zoom, they can click the raise hand button if you would like to make a public comment on this item. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes, and we do have one hand raised, which I will call on. No name on the Zoom other than hotel, but let me allow them to talk. Can you hear us?
Good evening. This is Barbara Ellman.
Oh, yeah.
Commissioner Ellman. I just wanted to just remind, we've already had this discussion at our commission meeting, but Commissioner Hayes has brought up a number of questions, and I just would like to again say that I just feel that these two commissions, the Parks and Rec Commission and the Public Works Commission, need to work closer. There were a number of great questions asked by many of you tonight. And I think that we all need to ask those questions in the same room at one time. This is a very large CIP. We're not planting a few trees or digging a hole to move a piece of equipment in a park. And I do not agree that the information was shared with the commission in a detailed manner. That is the issue that I had. So I appreciate all the questions. It's obvious that by some of the questions that some people don't know the history of pickleball. Should they at the Public Works level? I'm not sure, but I think it would have helped you understand what we need to do at these courts, what works and what doesn't work. So again, I just hope that in the future that we will meet before a large CIP so we can work together. Thank you.
Do we have anybody else?
Last call for anyone who is watching via Zoom. If you would like to make a public comment, you can click the raise hand button. Second. No, Chairperson, we have no other speakers.
All right, I close public comment and move on to deliberation. Anybody wish to start?
Make some comments.
Sure.
Yeah. Having been around since this whole thing started, I must say that I'm definitely supportive of this. I think when we talk about noise level, I think sometimes what's blamed on pickleball should be spread out to the Clark field because we have a lot of parents and kids that make a lot of noise out there for the good reason. And also tennis courts sometimes make a lot of noise. And knowing that pickleball, when we started, and they, as you ask about it being at the community center, like she said, the residents are much too close. This to me is a perfect plan for the situation we're in. And I think the city has taken made every possible effort to resolve anything that would be not ADA compliant or would deal with the noise. It's been a long project, and I think that we have that many residents, and I think pickleball is going to become even more popular. It was first an older population, but the fact that people are jumping the fence means some younger people must be playing. So I think we should move this project forward.
Anybody else?
Yeah, no, I don't know the history or the backstory, at least not the details. But I do agree that within the space we have in the city, and with the progress that we've made in its existing form and location, it seems like a good place for it. And it's also nice that we have lawn bowling, baseball, basketball, tennis, and pickleball all in, well, basically as neighbors all in one place, which is kind of nice. And again, the community center doesn't really seem like a viable option right now. They can be repurposed if necessary, but I agree with Chairperson Britton in that from what I've seen, it's actually been increasing in popularity. So I'm sure we'll get another 5, 10, 15 years of use out of that before whatever next shows up. I actually played my first pickleball game last weekend, so I'm now officially an old person, I guess. Or maybe not, maybe it's for everyone now. So I think the plan looks very thorough and looks very detailed, and I like the fact that we're addressing multiple things all at the same time. So it looks like a solid plan to me.
Do you want a motion or?
Not quite yet.
Okay.
I've got a couple of comments. So I was disappointed when the bids were rejected, but I'm moving forward. And there is a part of me that really wants to see this go because it's a worthwhile project, and I like to see us get things done quickly and efficiently. At the same time, City Council did send it back to the commissions to look at it, so there's a certain due diligence that's required on our part. So one thing I'll ask you, would the Public Works Department be willing to at least look into the possibility of adding some padding on the south wall where we have a concrete wall, given that our clearances between the wall and the play area requirements are inches of margin?
Thank you, Commissioner. That would be definitely something that we could explore and look into.
Great. And then again, in terms of due diligence versus wanting to see this move forward, I think the big reason we're here is this business of 2 courts versus 4 courts. So I was really pleased that the Parks Commission made the motion and the recommendation to move forward with this design as configured with the 4 courts, which we have clarified. We've always had 4 courts except for this downtime because of safety reasons. So I appreciate you being able to look at that. So that was good to see we can keep moving forward with the 4 courts. And then the only thing that was left in my mind was, what is the likelihood, and I'm asking this rhetorically for now, what is the likelihood that we might end up doing some kind of soundproofing? And from what I know about these soundproofing measures, they can be heavy, they don't let the wind through, you can get a lot of loading on the fences. What if we didn't design the fence and the posts strong enough for it? I think that the likelihood that we're going to do anything like that's going to make us go back and redesign that fence, I think it's low. That's my assessment right now. And I got that based on reading the history of the sound studies and what the working groups did with the Parks and Rec Commission. I did talk to Lisa to get her experience. I met with Commissioners Ellman and Maroney. Commissioner Ellman has done a boatload of work of her own initiative. She was able to reel off not a few, but several cities where she contacted people. It sounds like they tried to do sound mitigation measures, but inevitably we're mainly going back to using the policy and the usage as their main tool for addressing the sound issues. So based on what I'm hearing, and then our city engineer, I don't know if you have an opinion about the effectiveness of some of those sound devices.
Thank you, Commissioner. Based on what I have heard and researched in other communities, again, as I alluded to earlier, in an open field, you cannot necessarily be able to install sound attenuation devices. And I'm going to put my structural engineer hat in here for a minute, just visualizing a solid surface, whatever it might be, on those, on the fencing and the perimeter. There is a reason for a chain link fence to have the openings that it has, and there's a reason for the fabric to be able to, the wind to go through it. Because if you didn't, imagine this, you have 10 feet high poles and fencing. You create a solid surface out of that by putting a device of whatever means. You are adding a lot of lateral load to those posts that cannot handle the wind, the conditions, and the additional lateral loads. It just simply cannot. So it will be a major investment, not only to explore from the design standpoint, which I think if I hired an expert, acoustics expert, he would tell me that it's going to be hard to achieve anything like that in the open field. And if we were to experiment with anything, then we have to expend a considerable amount of money to reconfigure the size of the foundations and the posts and all of that, that adds to the size of the project, to the point that it make us to be at a point that we are going to exceed the allotted budget for this. So it's not a practical solution.
Can I just, on that note, Commissioner Ellman mentioned in, I think it was in the Parks and Rec meeting, that putting up the sound barriers also prevents wind from getting in, so it makes the courts very hot.
Yes. Yes. I heard that too and was going to mention it. Thank you for that. That's okay. You want to piggyback on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, he support, that would create a whole new project and expense, and this would even hold up the project further, and it may not be that effective. So I would not like to have that part of this proposal at this time. I would say that would be a separate issue after everything's done to see if it's necessary. But again, there's so many activities there that pickleball may not be the only thing creating sound to bother the neighbors. So we're just kind of putting a Band-Aid on a situation that can't be solved.
Yeah, I'm just trying to help demonstrate why I don't think this project is at risk because of the low likelihood we're going to go down that path. But since we're establishing that, I don't know that we've ever had such a discussion. I really appreciate that we've got the city engineer to weigh in. We talk about marrying the two worlds of public works and parks and recreation, and I think having an engineer weigh in addition to the research done by some of the parks commissioners is really looking at it from both sides. So I appreciate that. And then I'm just going to add my own 2 cents further. There's the cost. So just to get one data point, it turns out that the drawing package calls out the type of windscreens we're using. The vendor that sells those windscreens also sells this material, an acoustic material. It's much, much heavier. And I computed the perimeter times the height and the cost per foot, and just the materials alone and the attachments could be easily $25,000 to $30,000, plus the installation, plus all this boatload of engineering that might be necessary. So just to get a rough idea as to the costs as well. And then just to finally, maybe I should have said this at the onset, I did rewatch the council meeting before the Parks and Rec Commission meeting and for this meeting, and there was one council member that was skeptical about the assertions about the effectiveness of these types of measures. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this here and now is so that if this comes up at the council meeting, we will have talked about it now, and then that way we'll be able to really move forward with this project as I'd love to see us do. So thank you for indulging me on that.
Good idea.
Yeah,
If I
I'm
may.
just going to, go ahead.
Oh, all I wanted to say was I would like to have that put in the minutes that we did have this discussion about the noise. If there was anything that we could put up that would help lessen the noise. And the reasons against not doing it, or for doing it, I guess.
And it was just to jump onto the sound discussion, because I just looking at the map and at the drawings and the scale, the distance to the houses that are experiencing the issues is quite a bit further than the ones on the other side of the green belt that aren't experiencing issues. So part of it is the trees. Part of it is the fact that it's a little bit of an amphitheater. I also see that there's a line of trees in front of many of the houses on the west side, but not on the south side. So perhaps there's an opportunity to put a few trees in there. The problem is that if you look at a freeway or another major thoroughfare and the soundproofing, it's all in a free field, so it's really limited what you can do. I've also done a little bit of acoustic work as well. And this is primarily impulse noise. It's transients, higher pitched, and those are going to be really difficult to attenuate to a sufficient level where people aren't going to notice. So I think actually just setting reasonable hours makes a lot of sense. And with 4 courts, it'll probably be a lot easier for people to get access, and that might also mitigate the irritation to whichever neighbors find it a problem.
Okay, I've got a few comments. I asked the questions that I asked very deliberately because I feel very strongly that the council should not have rejected all bids. I feel pretty confident that the price is going to go up as prices are. I work. My daytime job is I run an estimating department for a large construction company. Prices are going up, and so I am very sure that the prices are going to go up. I think that there were ample opportunities to ask questions about this project as we went through. I think we're holding up a construction project because people want to talk about the use of the court and the noise issue, not the construction issue. I don't know that for a fact, but that's the feeling I get. Most of the issues that were brought up seem to have more to do with the use than anything else. By delaying this project, there's going to be, this project would have been done probably by the beginning of summer, and we would have had pickleball on 4 courts, double the amount of pickleball all summer. Now, we'll be lucky if we start by the end of summer, and I think that is even optimistic at this point. In addition to the staff time and taxpayer money that we've wasted by going through this, and really, I mean, I don't know how this vote's going to go, but I'm assuming we're going to approve this, and Parks and Rec approved it with no further recommendations. I don't know what council will do, but it seems like it's got kicked back to just go back exactly the way it was, and that's very frustrating to me. This project should be approved, should have been approved, and I hope that council does move it through and doesn't waste any more time or unnecessary time or additional money on this project. One other comment about the padding. At this point, the padding, I don't know that it necessarily needs to be added to the CIP. That can be done, that's primarily a purchasing thing, and then you'd have the guys hook it up. I don't know that it needs to be added on the plans or anything like that. I think that can be handled separately.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if it ended up that you assessed it and then it happened maybe as a change order during the process or something, if that was found to be the best path to go down, So I'm not specifying a timeline for that, just that you'll at least consider it.
Yeah. And again, I'm concerned we're not going to have as much budget to do this project because I believe the contractor's price is going to go up. Does anybody have a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion just to approve the Project 619 Kelly Court improvements.
So I believe what we're being asked here is to make a recommendation to council.
And recommend that they move forward with
The
619.
Okay. I have a motion.
I second it.
All right, we have a vote. Any discussion?
Okay, voting should be open, and this motion is to recommend to City Council to move forward with the Kelly Court CIP. And Commissioner.
I'll be with
Bear?
you in a second.
Voting is closed and motion passes.
All right, I think that brings us to adjournment. Thank you, everyone on the commission. Thank you for staff for coming in for this special meeting. I think it's important so we can get it back in front of council as soon as possible. We are adjourned.